The words hit me like a freight train derailing at full speed. Standing in the darkened hallway of our suburban home, clutching a burp cloth that smelled of sour milk and broken dreams, I felt my entire world crumble with just one sentence. She is just a stay-at-home mom. No drive, no hustle. I carry everything. Daniel's voice drifted through the crack in his office door, casual and dismissive, as if he were discussing the weather or last night's baseball game. But he was talking about me, his wife, the woman who had given up her marketing career, her creative aspirations, her very identity to support his dreams. I pressed my back against the cool wall, my heart hammering so loudly I was certain he would hear it through the thin drywall. The baby monitor in my other hand crackled with static, a reminder of the two precious souls sleeping upstairs who depended on me for everything. Emma, barely 3, with her wild curls and endless questions, and little Jake, just 18 months old, who still woke up 3 times a night looking for his mama. Seriously, man, Daniel continued, his voice gaining confidence as he spoke to his college buddy on the other end of the line. I do not know what happened to her. She used to be so ambitious, so driven. Now she just sits around in yoga pants all day, complaining about being tired. I mean, how hard can it be to watch kids and keep house? The burp cloth slipped from my trembling fingers and hit the hardwood floor with a soft thud that seemed to echo like thunder in my ears. How hard can it be? I thought of my typical day. Up at 5:30 when Jake started crying, nurse him while Emma climbed into bed demanding breakfast, change diapers, wipe noses, referee toddler battles, attempt to shower while they destroyed the living room, grocery shopping with 2 screaming children, cooking dinner while entertaining them, bath time battles, bedtime stories, laundry, dishes, picking up toys, collapsing into bed only to do it all again the next day. But Daniel saw none of that. He left at 7 in the morning in his pressed shirts that I ironed, carrying lunch I had packed with love notes tucked inside, and he returned at 6:30 to a clean house, fed children, and a wife who somehow managed to look presentable despite the chaos that had consumed her entire day. She has no ambition anymore, he said, and I could hear him leaning back in his expensive office chair, the one I had helped him pick out when he got his promotion. Sometimes I wonder if I made a mistake, you know? Maybe I should have married someone with more drive, more business sense. Someone who could be a real partner. The words sliced through me like shattered glass, each syllable drawing blood from wounds I had not even known existed. I had been a real partner. I had been the one who encouraged him to apply for that promotion, who stayed up all night helping him prepare presentations, who believed in his potential when he doubted himself. I had been the one who said yes when he suggested I should stay home after Emma was born, who agreed it made financial sense, who convinced myself that being a mother was the most important job in the world. And now 3 years later, I was invisible. Worthless. Just a mom. I tiptoed back to our bedroom, my bare feet silent on the floor I had mopped earlier that day. The room was dark except for the glow of the baby monitor, casting eerie shadows on the walls that suddenly felt like prison bars. I sat on the edge of our bed. The same bed where we had made our children, where we had whispered dreams and promises, where he had once told me I was his everything. The tears came then, hot and bitter, streaming down my cheeks as I stared at my reflection in the dresser mirror. Who was this woman looking back at me? Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun held together with a rubber band I had found on the kitchen counter. Her face was pale and drawn, with dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. Her clothes were stained with finger paints and applesauce, and her hands were rough from constant washing and cleaning. When had I become this person? When had I stopped being Sarah, the woman who had graduated summa cum laude with a degree in marketing, who had landed her dream job at a prestigious agency, who had ideas and opinions and fire in her belly? When had I become just a mom? But as I sat there in the darkness, something strange began to happen. The pain in my chest started to transform, like coal under pressure becoming diamond. The tears stopped flowing, and my breathing became steady and deliberate. I was not just hurt anymore. I was angry. No, that was not strong enough. I was furious. Daniel thought I had no drive, no hustle, no ambition. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. I stood up and walked to the small desk in the corner of our bedroom, the one I had bought with my own money back when I thought I might use it for freelance work. I had not touched it in months, But now I pulled out the chair and sat down. I opened the bottom drawer and found a notebook, its pages blank and full of possibility. At the top of the first page, I wrote in bold letters, Empire Blueprint. I had no idea what that empire would look like yet, but I knew one thing for certain. I was going to build something that would make Daniel eat every single word he had just spoken. The next morning, I went through my usual routine as if nothing had changed. I woke up early, nursed Jake, made breakfast for Emma, kissed Daniel goodbye as he left for work. But inside I was different. Inside I was planning. After the kids were down for their afternoon nap, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, the same one I had used to build PowerPoint presentations for Daniel's meetings. I opened Instagram and created a new account at Mom Made Empire. I had no followers, no content, no clear plan. But I had something more powerful than any of that. I had nothing left to lose. I started with what I knew best, feeding my family. I took a photo of the simple lasagna I was making for dinner, nothing fancy, just ground beef, pasta, and sauce. But I wrote a caption about the chaos of cooking with toddlers, about finding joy in the mundane, about the love that went into every meal even when no one seemed to notice. The post got 3 likes. One was from my sister, one from my college roommate, and one from a stranger whose profile picture showed a woman about my age holding a baby. It was a start. Over the next few weeks, I posted religiously. Photos of my messy kitchen, videos of Emma helping me crack eggs, stories about the disasters that happened when I tried to cook while Jake was teething. I shared grocery budget tips, meal prep ideas, and the truth about what dinner looked like in a house with 2 toddlers. Slowly, miraculously, people began to follow. Not many at first, just a few dozen women who seemed to understand the beautiful chaos of motherhood. They commented on my posts, shared their own stories, asked for recipes. For the first time in years, I felt seen. Daniel never asked what I was doing on my phone. He assumed I was scrolling mindlessly through social media, wasting time while he worked to support our family. He had no idea I was building something. My first viral moment came 6 weeks after I started posting. I had made a simple video showing how to make a budget-friendly lasagna that would feed a family of 4 for under $10. I filmed it while Jake napped in his high chair, and Emma played with blocks at my feet, occasionally wandering into the frame to add her own commentary. The video was raw, unpolished, real. I did not have professional lighting or a fancy camera. I had a phone propped up against a stack of cookbooks and a dream that was growing stronger every day. When I woke up the next morning, the video had been viewed 50,000 times. My follower count had jumped from 800 to 5,000 overnight. My inbox was flooded with messages from women thanking me for showing them that they were not alone in their struggles. That was when I knew I had something special. I started posting more frequently, sharing not just recipes but stories. I talked about the loneliness of being a stay-at-home mom, about feeling invisible and undervalued. I shared my struggles with postpartum depression, my fears about losing myself in motherhood, my dreams of being more than just someone's wife and mother. The response was overwhelming. Women from all over the world reached out to tell me their own stories, to thank me for giving them permission to want more, to dream bigger. My community grew from thousands to tens of thousands. All of us united by the shared experience of being mothers who refused to be defined solely by that role. 3 months after I started posting, I got my first brand partnership offer. A small kitchenware company wanted to send me some products to feature in my videos. The payment was modest, just a few $100s, but it was the first money I had earned in 3 years. I remember holding that check in my hands, tears streaming down my face as I realized what it represented. It was not just money. It was validation. It was proof that I had value beyond what I could do for my family. Daniel noticed the packages arriving at our house, the ring lights I had purchased, the tripod I used to film my videos. When he asked about them, I told him I had started a little hobby blog. He nodded distractedly and went back to his phone, uninterested in the details of how I spent my time. If he had been paying attention, he would have seen the fire in my eyes. He would have noticed the way I stayed up late editing videos, the notebooks filled with content ideas, the careful planning that went into every post. He would have seen that his wife was not just a stay-at-home mom anymore. She was becoming something else entirely. 6 months in, I launched my first product, A meal planning guide that I had created based on the systems I used to feed my own family. I priced it at $27 and promoted it to my now 50,000 followers. It sold out in 3 days. I remember sitting in my car in the grocery store parking lot, staring at the sales numbers on my phone in disbelief. In 3 days, I had made more money than I used to make in a month at my old job. And I had done it all while being present for my children, while maintaining our household, while being the wife and mother everyone expected me to be. But I was just getting started. The success of the meal planning guide opened doors I had not even known existed. Food brands started reaching out, wanting to partner with me. A literary agent contacted me about writing a cookbook. A podcast network asked me to host a show about mom entrepreneurship. Each opportunity built on the last, creating momentum that felt almost unstoppable. I was not just posting random content anymore. I was building a brand, creating systems, developing multiple revenue streams. I was becoming everything Daniel had said I was not: driven, ambitious, successful. The irony was not lost on me that I was doing it all from the same kitchen where he had dismissed me as having no hustle. 8 months after I started posting, I got the call that changed everything. A major food network wanted to feature me in a segment about mom entrepreneurs. They were going to film at my house, interview me about my journey, and showcase my brand on national television. I scheduled the filming for a day when Daniel would be at work. I did not tell him about it. I did not want him to know what I was building until I was ready to reveal it on my own terms. The day of the filming, I woke up before dawn to prepare. I had my hair and makeup done professionally for the first time in years. I wore a dress that made me feel confident and powerful, not the yoga pants and stained t-shirts that had become my uniform. As the camera crew set up in my kitchen, I caught a glimpse of myself in the reflection of the oven door. The woman looking back at me was not the same one who had stood in that hallway 10 months ago, broken and defeated. This woman had light in her eyes, purpose in her posture, and a smile that came from deep within her soul. The interview went perfectly. I talked about my journey from invisible housewife to successful entrepreneur, about the challenges of building a business while raising small children, about the importance of women supporting women in their dreams. I was articulate, passionate, and authentic in a way that surprised even me. When the segment aired 2 weeks later, my world exploded. My follower count jumped from 50,000 to 200,000 in a single day. Media outlets reached out for interviews. Book publishers made offers. Investment firms wanted to discuss funding opportunities. And Daniel was completely oblivious to all of it. He came home from work that night just as he always did, expecting dinner on the table, and a wife who had spent her day doing nothing more important than keeping his children alive and his house clean. But I was not that woman anymore. I was the CEO of a growing empire, a brand that was about to become a household name, a success story that would inspire millions of women to believe in their own potential. The universe seemed to have a sense of humor about timing. The day my first major product launch went live was the same day Daniel's favorite sports podcast happened to feature one of my advertisements. I had invested a significant portion of my earnings into a professional ad campaign, complete with television-quality production values and a catchy jingle. The tagline I had chosen was not accidental: from stay-at-home to made-from-home. I was in the kitchen making dinner when I heard my own voice coming from Daniel's office. For a moment, I thought I was imagining things. But then I heard it again, clear as day. My slogan, my voice, my face that he must have seen on his phone screen. The silence that followed was deafening. I could picture him sitting in his chair, mouth agape, trying to process what he had just witnessed. His wife, the woman he had dismissed as having no drive or ambition, was advertising her own product line on his favorite podcast. My phone buzzed with a text message. "Is this what you have been doing instead of folding laundry?" I stared at the message for a long moment, remembering the night I had overheard him on the phone, the way his words had shattered my heart and my sense of self-worth. Now, almost a year later, I had an answer for him. Instead of responding immediately, I walked to my home office and pulled out my media kit. It was a professional document that showcased my brand statistics, my audience demographics, my product sales figures, and my upcoming projects. It was the kind of document that serious business people use to make serious deals. I attached it to an email and sent it to Daniel with a simple subject line. You wanted to know what I have been doing. The media kit told the story in cold, hard numbers. 6-figure annual revenue. 250,000 social media followers. Television appearances. Book deals. Product lines sold in major retailers. Speaking engagements at entrepreneurship conferences. It was not the story of a woman with no drive or ambition. It was the story of a woman who had been underestimated, who had channeled her pain into purpose, who had built something extraordinary from nothing more than determination and a smartphone. When Daniel came downstairs for dinner that night, he looked at me differently. There was confusion in his eyes, maybe even a hint of respect. But there was also something else, something that looked suspiciously like fear. I had no idea, he said quietly as we sat across from each other at the table where I had planned my empire. I did not know you were building all of this. I met his gaze steadily, my voice calm and controlled. You never asked. Over the following weeks, Daniel tried to insert himself into my success story. He offered to help with my business, to quit his job and become my manager, to be the supportive husband he should have been from the beginning. But it was too late for that. I had learned to fly on my own, and I was not about to clip my wings for anyone, not even the man I had once loved more than life itself. My empire continued to grow. I launched a line of kitchen products that bore my name and my story. I wrote a best-selling book about finding your purpose in the chaos of motherhood. I started a podcast that reached millions of women around the world. I built a team of employees who believed in my vision and helped me turn dreams into reality. Every success was a vindication, every milestone a statement that I was not just a mom. I was a mom who had refused to be diminished, who had transformed her pain into power, who had proven that being underestimated was not the same as being without potential. The speaking engagement that changed everything came 18 months after I started my journey. I was invited to give a keynote address at the National Women's Entrepreneurship Conference, sharing the stage with CEOs and founders whose names I had once only read in business magazines. As I stood behind the podium, looking out at an audience of thousands of women who had come to hear my story, I thought about the woman I had been that night in the hallway. She had felt so small, so invisible, so worthless. But she had also been strong enough to transform her breaking point into her breakthrough. Ladies, I began, my voice carrying across the auditorium with confidence I had never known I possessed. I want to tell you about the night my husband called me worthless. Because that night, I made a decision that changed everything. The speech went viral. Video clips spread across social media platforms, inspiring women to share their own stories of underestimation and triumph. Media outlets featured my journey as proof that it was never too late to reinvent yourself, that motherhood did not have to mean the end of your dreams. My business continued to expand. I opened a flagship store in downtown Chicago, a beautiful space that showcased my products and hosted workshops for aspiring mom entrepreneurs. I hired a team of 50 employees, many of them mothers who had been inspired by my story to pursue their own dreams. The day we celebrated our first $10 million in revenue, I threw a party for my entire team. As I stood in the conference room of my corporate headquarters, surrounded by the women and men who had helped me build something extraordinary, I felt a sense of accomplishment that went beyond financial success. I had not just built a business. I had built a movement. I had shown the world that mothers were not just caregivers but creators, not just supporters but leaders, not just wives but women with their own dreams and ambitions. Daniel was still in my life, still the father of my children, but our relationship had fundamentally changed. He no longer saw me as his subordinate or his dependent. He saw me as his equal, maybe even his superior in some ways. The balance of power in our household had shifted dramatically. I was now the primary breadwinner, the one with the demanding schedule, the one whose career took precedence. Daniel had been forced to step up in ways he never had before, taking on more responsibility for childcare and household management. It was an adjustment for both of us, but especially for him. He had to confront the reality that his assumptions about gender roles and family dynamics had been not just wrong but harmful. He had to acknowledge that his dismissal of my potential had been based on prejudice rather than fact. Our marriage survived, but it was not the same marriage we had started with. It was something new, something more equal, something built on mutual respect rather than traditional expectations. 2 years after I started my journey, I was featured on the cover of Entrepreneur magazine as Mom Boss of the Year. The article detailed my rise from invisible housewife to successful CEO, highlighting the obstacles I had overcome and the empire I had built. When the magazine hit newsstands, I bought 20 copies and had them delivered to Daniel's office. I wanted his colleagues to see what his wife had accomplished, to understand that the woman who packed his lunch and raised his children was also a force to be reckoned with in the business world. The article quoted me as saying, "The biggest mistake people make is underestimating mothers. We are not just women who have given up our careers to raise children. We are women who have learned to manage multiple priorities, to work efficiently under pressure, to create solutions where none existed before. We are natural entrepreneurs." That quote became my motto, the philosophy that guided every decision I made in business and in life. I was not just a mom who had gotten lucky. I was a mom who had leveraged her unique skills and experiences to build something extraordinary. My children, now old enough to understand some of what I had accomplished, were proud of their mother in a way that filled my heart with joy. Emma, now 5, would tell people that her mommy was famous and had her own store. Jake, 3 years old, would point to my products in grocery stores and announce to anyone who would listen that his mommy made those. They were growing up with a different understanding of what mothers could be and do. They were learning that women were not limited by their roles as caregivers, that dreams did not have to be put on hold for family, that mothers could be both nurturing and ambitious. The legacy I was building was not just financial. It was cultural. It was proof that the old paradigms were changing, that women were refusing to be defined by others' expectations, that motherhood could be a source of strength rather than limitation. As I sat in my office on the 3rd anniversary of my company's founding, looking out at the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows, I reflected on the journey that had brought me there. It had started with heartbreak and humiliation, but it had transformed into something beautiful and powerful. I was no longer the woman who had stood in that hallway, broken and defeated. I was no longer just a mom. I was a mom who had built an empire, who had proven that being underestimated was not the same as being without potential, who had shown the world that mothers were not just caregivers but creators of their own destinies. The phone call that had started it all seemed like a lifetime ago. Daniel's words, once so devastating, now seemed almost laughable. He had said I had no drive, no hustle, no ambition. He had been spectacularly wrong. But in a strange way, I was grateful for that night. It had been the catalyst for everything that followed. It had forced me to confront my own potential, to stop accepting others' definitions of my worth, to start believing in myself again. My empire was not just built on recipes and meal plans. It was built on the determination of a woman who had refused to be diminished, who had transformed her pain into purpose, who had proven that being just a mom was actually being everything. The woman who had been invisible was now impossible to ignore. The woman who had been dismissed was now celebrated. The woman who had been underestimated had become unstoppable. And Daniel? He was still eating my food, just like the rest of the country. But now he knew exactly what it was worth. The only thing I stayed at home for now was profit. And that was exactly how I liked it. My story was not just about revenge, though that had been satisfying. It was about reclamation. It was about taking back the power that had been given away, about refusing to accept others' limitations, about believing in your own potential even when no one else does. It was about proving that being a mother did not mean being less than. It meant being more than anyone ever imagined possible. And as I looked toward the future, toward the new products I would launch, the new women I would inspire, the new barriers I would break, I knew that this was just the beginning. The empire I had built was not just mine. It belonged to every woman who had ever been told she was not enough, who had ever felt invisible, who had ever been underestimated because of her choices or her circumstances. We were not just moms. We were warriors. We were creators. We were the architects of our own destinies. And we were just getting started. If this story inspired you to believe in your own potential, please subscribe to our channel for more empowering tales of women who refuse to be defined by others' expectations. Hit that notification bell to never miss a story of transformation, triumph, and the incredible power of underestimated women. Your support helps us share these important stories with women everywhere who need to hear them. Subscribe now and join our community of unstoppable women.